Hi, everybody. Welcome to the How to Start a Podcast class here with the Digital Den. I am Ben Rutz, also known as Digital Ben, in charge of this space here at the Kokomo-Howard County Public Library. Just a little overview for what we're going to be breaking down here in this class. There are about 4 or 5 different sections here, some subsections that we will be talking about to be able to give you a process for everything that you'll need to know, going from just your idea all the way through getting everything up online, and even after you've launched your podcast, what to do to be able to make it more successful from there. So a little bit of everything. We'll go ahead and get things started. A little bit about me. I have 12 years of radio experience, worked at all kinds of different radio stations around the state of North Carolina, moved out here to Kokomo, Indiana 4.5 years ago to work on the radio for Z92.5 and a couple other radio stations. My radio experience has made me a wealth of knowledge in the world of audio equipment. So in that section, I've got a lot of different advice on that. And I hosted a podcast for a couple of years called Genre Flip. That podcast was a movie podcast. Basically, a buddy of mine and I would watch a movie, and then we would review that movie and then talk about what that movie would have been like if it were a different genre. So flipping the script a little bit, like if Toy Story were a horror movie, how would that have gone, sort of thing. And then the library has a podcast as well called Off the Books that I oversee and edit using all of the equipment that we have here in the Digital Den. So that is kind of the podcast experience that I have. Starting things off, we're going to go over your podcast plan. This is the thing that you should look into before you start your podcast, because podcast it does cost money, so you're going to need to make a budget for that. It doesn't have to be a lot of money, but it does have to be some. And it requires regular time. So putting down a schedule and kind of writing that out for yourself on a week-to-week basis, knowing ahead of time how much time you're going to commit to the podcast can help you from being surprised by how much of a commitment that a podcast really is. So starting things off with your idea. This is something that I'm not going to dive a whole lot into, because what your idea for your podcast is totally up to you. But as for that, one of the hangups that I know that a lot of people have is they feel like they need to be an expert on a topic to be able to talk about it. That's actually not the case. You just have to be charismatic about it. You just have to be passionate about this topic to be able to hold a conversation long enough that people would want to tune into that. The picture that I have over here to represent that is just like a stereo radio sort of situation. Like, I mean, in my 12 years in radio, I am not an expert on most things, but I talked about things all across the map, and people would want to tune in just for the entertainment value of it. And so if you are really interested in a topic, but you don't think that you're an expert on it, that's okay. If you, as long as you can have an enjoyable conversation about a topic, people will want to listen. Okay, so this part of your podcast plan is about creating a schedule, okay? So what I mean by a schedule is create a to-do list of all the things that you need to do before you record each individual episode of your podcast, okay? So think about your idea and think about how much prep time it's going to take you to be able to get ready for every individual episode, and try to think about that in terms of the amount of time. So thinking about the podcast that I hosted for a couple of years called Genre Flip, it was a weekly podcast where we would watch a movie every single week. So I had to document the amount of time that it took me to watch that movie. Then I would take some notes on that throughout the movie and a little bit afterwards. And then I would also refresh my memory on the common tropes for the genre that we were going to be flipping things into. All in all, in terms of the amount of time that it took for me to prepare, about 2 to 3 hours each week. of prep time, depending on the length of the movie. And then, of course, you've got the length of record time for your podcast. So that's could be up to an hour or however long that you want each episode to be. And then your editing time on top of that. So thinking about the amount of time that it's going to take you for each episode should give you an idea if you want this to be a weekly, a bi-weekly, or a monthly podcast, so that you don't take on a little bit too much and then have to back off a little bit so that you don't lose any listeners that you've accumulated from your earlier episodes. Okay. And then finally, for your podcast plan, let's talk about making a budget. Like I mentioned earlier, it is something that has a cost. It'll always have at least some cost. The hosting service is something that you always have to pay for, but it's not that expensive. It's a yearly cost of anywhere between $50 and $100. And it just depends on where you go. Your equipment costs, you can get away with completely free equipment. So you don't. So if you're concerned about the money aspect of that, you can get away with that. And then marketing, believe it or not, you can get away with $0 in marketing and still do have an effective marketing plan as well. But one thing that you'll want to budget for is any additional costs. For example, my podcast, every once in a while, I would have to buy the movie that we were going to watch. And so that was an additional cost that I had to account for, and you may have to account for that as well. All right, part 2, equipment. I will be breaking down your equipment into 2 separate sections, your microphones and then your recording equipment, the like editing software and such. And I'll even be breaking it down by category. So going from free to most expensive. Spoiler alert on the expensive stuff, I do not recommend that you just drop a bunch of cash on your microphone equipment right off the bat, because if you have any doubts at all on your podcast, I do not want for you to just unload $600 on equipment that you could go for a cheaper option. And then if you have some success in your podcast and you want to splurge on some more expensive equipment down the line, it's better to go with some decent equipment and then improve from there, rather than starting with top of the line and your podcast, you decide you don't want to go with it anywhere anymore, and then you just have all this equipment. Okay, so starting off with your free equipment, you can actually use what you already have. So even if you are watching this class on your phone or on your tablet, your phone and tablet have microphones on there, and you have an app already, like the voice memo app, you can record using that. So that is a completely free that you already have option there. Plus, if you have a webcam, there's a microphone built in on that, and a lot of laptops already have microphones built in. So you could use those, especially for just like testing, your podcast out, testing the waters on that. You can use those options. Also, the digital den where I'm recording this podcast this class right now, this space is totally free to everyone. Even if you do not have a library card, you can come in and reserve this space. That picture in the bottom right, that is of our microphone and one of our computers that we have that you can record on. We have 2. We do have that computer is in our dedicated recording studio space, which you could also reserve to be able to get started with your podcast and run some tests in there and stuff. So that is an option for you to be able to reserve. Jumping ahead into the cheap options there. Your cheapest option, if you do want to buy a microphone, is going to be your lavalier microphone. What that is a very short range microphone. Don't worry, in this picture, there's like a million words, and that's just so that they get hits on Amazon. But I wanted to show you the cheapest one. This is only $14, which is pretty cheap to be able to get things started with your podcast. And the cool thing is that these microphones plug directly into your phone or your computer, so that you can record using either your voice memo on your phone or any supplemental voice editing, audio editing equipment that you have on your computer there. One thing that I do want to note about these lavalier microphones is that they are very short range. So this is only going to be good for recording one person. So you would clip it like right here to your shirt, and then run some tests to be able to make sure that you get the volume level appropriate for yourself. You may have to adjust the height of it and even the volume if you can on the specific one that you have. If you can't adjust the volume on it, you can just move it further away from your face. But you'll only be able to record yourself. So if you are recording multiple people in the podcast, you'll have to get multiple of them, etc. Okay. Into your medium range microphones. These are what I call your plug and play style microphones. These are microphones that essentially plug right into your computer and you're good to go. You don't have any additional, things that you need to install or anything like that. You're all set. This is a mid-range, and you've got a pretty wide range of price point there. The $70 is the cheapest that I've seen from this type of microphone. The Blue Snowball is what that is. It is similar to the Blue Yeti, which is the one in the picture here, which is your $130 microphone. And that actually goes on sale all the time, so you can even get it cheaper than that. But those are the types of microphones I actually recommend. Because it's not a huge investment, but you are getting some really decent quality. To talk about the quality a little bit, the Blue Yeti microphone is the microphone that we use here at the Digital Den. I actually own one myself, and it is the microphone that I use to record every single commercial that I recorded on Z92.5 for the last year of my time there. So that kind of speaks to the quality of that microphone. The Blue Yeti, the $130 one. The $90 one that's also in the picture there is pretty similar, but just with fewer capabilities that you could do with it. So in this first picture here, you can see in the bottom portion of that picture, you can see like the circles, and that's basically the different ways that you can use the microphone to be able to record. So that is helpful for if you have multiple people coming in, or if their studio setup is a certain way, you may find that you like one setting over the other. Okay. And the nice thing is that there's no additional equipment needed for this, unlike the expensive equipment. Again, I do not recommend the expensive equipment, but if you are somebody that's like always got to have top of the line, you can. This is what I recommend. If you watch any video podcasts, you may have noticed this microphone, either the Blue Yeti, sometimes they'll use those, or they'll likely use the Shure SM7B. I also have this microphone. I bought this microphone more for nostalgia. This was the first microphone I ever used when I started my radio career, and I wanted to have one. But the problem with microphones like this, of the expensive variety, is that you need lots of supplemental equipment. You got to have a preamp, which is the essential piece of equipment that will both connect your microphone to your computer and will raise the noise floor of that microphone to a volume level that people can actually hear. Because if you just plugged your microphone in, the noise floor is so low you couldn't hear yourself. That's why you got to amplify that volume to be able to get it high enough so that you could hear. You got to have some excess cabling. You got to have either a mic arm or a mic stand, because these microphones just come with a microphone, and then you got to do something with it. And you can't just like set it there on your desk, or it's going to sound terrible. A lot of times these microphones will come with windscreens, but you'll want one of those and a pop filter as well, because you got to be real close to these microphones, and because of that, your P's and T's sounds will have a pop. So you'll need a pop filter to go in between your mouth and the microphone to be able to catch those loud sounds. All right, moving on to your different editing software. We have multiple different options of editing software. I'll be honest, my experience in the software department is extremely narrow into only a couple of different programs, because I used the free option until I could get the industry standard, and then I worked basically there in the last 12 years on that equipment there. So but I do have some thoughts on other options as well. So jumping into the free options, if you are a Mac user, congratulations, you already have some equipment or some editing software pre-installed. GarageBand comes on every single Mac device, so you can use that to be able to record for yourself. Mac or the GarageBand is more for like music stuff. Like they have a ton of music options, but you can use it to be able to record yourself and do most of what you need to do for recording yourself on your podcast. Audacity is another great free option, and it's for any type of computer type, whether that be Windows, Mac, or with Linux. And it's free, and it'll do everything that you need it to do for the basic stuff on your podcast. Now, if you want a lot more control over editing, like post-processing and noise reduction and other stuff like that, you're going to run into trouble on both GarageBand and Audacity, and you'll likely want to use a higher quality program. Okay. Talking about the Digital Den again, real quick here. We actually have access to Adobe Audition, which is the one that I'm going to recommend as the industry standard coming up here in a little bit. But we also use GarageBand to be able to record stuff in our recording studio. And we use the Blue Yeti mic, as well as we have a pop filter and a windscreen. So all the equipment that you need, we've got it here at the Digital Den if you want to do some tests here. The industry standard is Adobe Audition, and I say industry standard as in both radio and the whole podcasting world. Pretty much everybody uses this piece of equipment. The only problem with Adobe is it is very, very, very expensive. We're talking $20.99 per month just for Adobe Audition, and then $52.99 per month for the entire Adobe Creative Suite. Now, they do run sales every once in a while to drop that price, and they also will reduce prices for students and teachers. So if you're a student or teacher, you can get a discount on that. For example, my dad's a professor for a community college, and he was able to get a discounted rate on that. And that goes on top of any sales. So if you want to wait for a sale and then on top of that get additional discounts, you can do that as well if you want to go for the yearly rate. But the thing that's great about Adobe products is they connect with each other. So if you want to have a video version of your podcast, you can connect that like Adobe Premiere with Adobe Audition and Adobe After Effects. They all play really well together so that it's a lot easier to edit. And of all programs that I've ever worked with, Adobe Audition has the best sound control after the fact. You know, your goal is you're going to want to have some clean audio recorded in. But even if you've got a few issues there, Adobe Audition is going to be your best bet for being able to clean up the audio to be able to still salvage stuff. You know, it's not a miracle worker. So if there's like all kinds of like construction in the background, or you know, somebody like a kid comes in and it's like, "Mom," or whatever in the middle of your recording, you know, can't fix that. But you know, for like an air conditioner or some louder computer hums and things like that, you can usually get that all taken care of with Adobe Audition. Okay. Other options, you may have heard of Pro Tools. You do not want to use that for your podcast because it's really expensive and it's it's not for podcasting. It's for music and stuff. Okay. But there are like a million companies out there that make audio editing software, and they're all very similar. And so they'll be somewhere between Audacity and Audition, in terms of quality of getting the job done. And there's I'm trying to think of like one off the top of my head. There's companies that will sell like a one-time cost. And it's like $30 or something like that, and then you have the audio editing software forever, and they work just fine. So if you see one and a friend of yours recommends it, or you just happen to see a good deal on one and you pick it up, it'll do what you need it to. Okay. Moving on to where you should record, this is just as important as the equipment that you decide to get. Because if the place that you're like, you know what, this would make an awesome recording studio, and your neighbor is always mowing their lawn, or right by your window, or maybe you've got like a loud air conditioner that is right there by where you're going to be recording, or I don't know, the location is very important. That's what I'm trying to get at here. Okay, so when choosing your recording space, I recommend that you run some tests on that area. Okay, by that I mean set up your equipment and either just let it record on its own and or record with you talking. Okay, and then just listen back to it. Listen and see kind of what do you notice in the background. Do you notice any sort of hums from any other equipment that may be running in your house? Maybe you're right near the furnace, or maybe you're right near, I don't know, whatever it may be. Just kind of listen back, and then maybe run a couple of different tests in different rooms in your house and see what room is going to work best for you. Okay. Like I said here in this slide, having the cleanest sound recorded in is going to make your job easier. So making sure that that space that you're recording in is going to have that, that really high quality sound is going to make your job easier editing down the line. Okay, now let's talk noise reduction here. Okay, I'm going to spend a little time on this slide here because there's a lot of things that go into noise reduction and a lot of misconceptions. So there's two different types of noise reduction. There is pre and post record. Okay, pre-record is like the different things that you add into your space to be able to reduce the amount of noise in the area. Okay, the picture that we have here is what's called acoustic paneling. It goes by some other names like foam padding and sound panels, stuff like that. But acoustic paneling is its technical name. And what that is for, it does not soundproof a room. A lot of people think that. What it actually does is it controls where the sound bounces in your room. So when you speak, an audio wave, you make a sound, right? Or if you make any sort of noise, an audio wave starts moving in the area that you're in, and it bounces all over the place. But if there are like soft things to help absorb that, it can reduce the amount of what's called reverb in the space that you're recording in. What reverb is, if you have a lot of like hard walls like this back here, all around your space, and you start talking in it, you'll start to notice like an echo-y sort of thing. That's reverb. And what you want in your audio is you really want to get rid of that reverb to a high degree so that you have clean audio going in without hearing yourself over and over and over again as you talk, right? Other things that reduce the amount of noise in your space, actually the best thing is a well-insulated room. So if you happen to have a room in your home that like for some reason there's just a ton of insulation in the walls there, I mean, well, it's always a good thing to have a well-insulated home. But every once in a while you've got one space that's just like super hot in there all the time because it's like so tightly insulated. That's a great space to be able to record in because insulation works as kind of a soundproofer for outside noise. Furniture is also a great way to be able to reduce noise in the room in terms of the amount of reverb that you're causing by making noise or by speaking in the room. So if you've got if you want to record in your bedroom, having your bed and your chair, maybe even a sofa in there, if you've got a big fancy bedroom, that is all going to be great for reducing the amount of noise. And any other soft material that you can put around yourself is going to make it great. The first setup that I ever had when recording for myself, I set up some bed sheets all around me and kind of created like a little cone of silence around me. And that kind of worked pretty well to be able to reduce the amount of noise in that space. The next type of noise reduction is post-record, and that is using some sort of editing software to be able to find and pinpoint the amount of noise or the type of noise that you want to get rid of, capturing that, and then removing that from all of the audio. I don't really recommend that, to be honest with you. Even though you can do it, it will ultimately end up removing more than what you want, okay? Noise reduction is only good in situations that are temporary, okay? So if, for example, you are recording your podcast and maybe somebody drives by and it's a little bit loud, maybe you hear like their muffler, or maybe you hear the lawnmower go by once or twice or whatever, and it has some limited noise. It's good for situations like that. What you'll do is you will capture the noise room separately when it's quiet, and you will remove the lawnmower noise and then replace it with the ambient sound, which is just the empty room noise, along with your recorded audio for your podcast. And that'll kind of make up for the loss of the noise there, if that makes sense. Post-record noise reduction is pretty complicated, so it's more of a conversation for another time. So if you have more questions about that, I recommend scheduling some time with me so that we can have a deeper dive on it. Moving on to the hosting and the distribution portion of this class, talking about how people are going to hear you, because you could have the nicest quality audio ever, and if no one ever hears it, it's like, what's even the point, right? So jumping into your hosting for your podcast, there's a ton of different hosting sites. The one that I use and the one that I'm going to talk about the most here in this class is SoundCloud. It's pretty affordable, and it's really easy to be able to work with. But like SoundCloud, Buzzsprout, Simplecast, they all work great, and they all do have a cost with them. It all varies very slightly, and the way that you'll upload stuff is a little bit different depending on the hosting site, but they're all basically the same. And once you pay for the service, they'll give you unlimited hours of record time. A lot of times hosting sites will give you like, oh, you can have 90 minutes of free time to record or whatever. So you could put like your first episode up without paying for it. But I recommend getting the subscription fee taken care of ahead of time, so that you don't have to run into the problem of accidentally going over the free time and then being like, oh no, my podcast got cut off, or whatever it is, So for the distribution stuff here, once you choose your hosting site, okay, and you're going to create an account with them, and you're going to need to create a logo for your podcast. And you're going to need to fill out all of the profile information for that, okay? And it'll walk you through all that stuff, and none of it, don't overthink any of it, because there's like categories on there, and there's only a handful of categories. There's only like 15 or whatever. And if you're like, yeah, my podcast is really specific and it doesn't, and there's no there's no category for cars or whatever it is that you want to talk about, it's probably under the entertainment, category. So just keep that in mind. The distribution portion of this process is insanely time consuming, but it is absolutely critical to the success of your podcast. So on this picture here, you'll notice a couple of things. You'll want to go to the settings tab on whatever hosting site you decide to go with, and then you'll go under content to find your RSS feed. This is what your hosting site provides for you. It provides an RSS feed that you will then use to be able to give to all of the different podcasting platforms. I'm talking Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, any of the other ones that I haven't mentioned, Pandora, all the other ones that people can listen to podcasts on. And just using that one RSS feed, you'll be able to submit it to all of those different locations all at once. And in the description below, I will have a link that shows you exactly how to do that step by step for every individual podcasting platform. But it's critical that you do it ahead of time. So before you start really promoting your podcast, making sure that it's up on all those platforms so that everybody that wants to listen to you can find you easily, instead of just having to only go to SoundCloud or wherever. You want people to be able to find it wherever they like. Okay. Moving on to marketing, and marketing is something that a lot of times people will think of as a thing that they should do after they start their podcast. But actually, if you really want your podcast to be successful, I highly recommend that you start marketing before you even release your first episode. That is initial marketing. I'm talking about creating some social media accounts to be able to engage with your listeners and build some hype around that. Okay, there are online communities that already talk about whatever topic that you want to discuss. If it is something related to your business specifically, try to find something similar and be like, hey, I've got a new podcast, check this out. You know, if you are doing a podcast about a certain TV show or whatever, you know, go to Reddit and go to the different subreddits on that TV show and be like, hey, I got a podcast coming out. Come check it out on my social media or whatever. You know, there are various, Facebook groups and all kinds of different things that probably already discuss the topic that you want to talk about, and they are, your target market already waiting there for you, right? So also, put it out there on your own social media and all kinds of other stuff to be able to build some buzz about that. Your goal is to get on what's called the new and noteworthy section of the podcasting platform. Every podcasting platform has it. Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, they all have it. And the cool thing about the new and noteworthy section is that if you get a lot of listens on your first couple episodes, your podcast will get up there. And then anytime somebody's like, man, I need a new podcast, and they'll be scrolling through over the next couple of weeks, they'll see your podcast, and hopefully you'll get some new listeners that way. Okay. The next great marketing technique is called the reward system, and this is not anything that is going to have to cost you money. I mean, it can. If you're like, oh, if I get 100 listeners, I'm going to give one person $100 or whatever. You don't have to spend any money on it. A reward is anything that makes the person feel really valued, right? So if you encourage people to leave you reviews on your podcast, which will help your podcast grow, the more reviews you get, positive ones, you say that you're going to read those reviews live on your podcast at the end or something, people will write you a review, and if you read them, they'll feel really connected to your podcast and go, oh my gosh, that's me. I'm a part of this. And then they'll want to keep coming back because they'll feel like they're a part of the family, right? Another thing that you can do is you can accept recommendations from people and give them shout outs. If you take those recommendations, like if you have a full topic that you're going to talk about on your podcast as recommended by one of your listeners, give them a shout out for that, and they'll feel really included, and that they'll feel like they were rewarded for their recommendation. And then another thing that you can do is create bonus material. People do this all the time on Patreon. If you become a Patreon subscriber, you can get bonus content. Or if we get X amount of subscribers to our channel or to our podcast, or we get X amount of listens, then we'll give you bonus content. Things like that are great rewards. Okay. And then finally, you've got your partnerships option here, which is I highly recommend that you reach out to similar podcasts to yourself. Maybe the reason why you wanted to start this podcast is because you have a podcast that you already listen to that is kind of similar. So reach out to them. What do you got to lose? Reach out to them and see if they would be interested in joining you on your podcast or having you on their podcast. To be able to kind of share in the market that they reach out to. So I was able to have somebody on my podcast from another podcast whenever I was working on genre flip. And it wasn't exactly the same. It was kind of similar to ours, and they reviewed different stories, and if people had different abilities or whatever in their story, how would they have how successful would the movie have been, or how successful would their goals have been, blah, blah, blah. And anyway, it kind of changed the way that we did our podcast for that episode, but we were able to reach out to their market and they were able to get in on our market, and it was kind of a cool partnership. Anyway, that's it for marketing, and that's it for the entire class. If you have any additional questions about things that I did not cover here, feel free to email me directly, brutz@khcpl.org. Feel free to call me, 765-626-0828. That's my direct line here at the Digital Den, and you can stop on into any of our days that we have open hours to be able to have any of your questions answered, and I'd be happy to get back with you on that. Our next class is going to be how to start a YouTube channel. We'll be doing that on June 7th. That's the first Monday. I'd like to start having, the first Monday of every month be class nights. So starting with this one, the podcast, and then the YouTube channel after that. And then we'll do some more classes beyond there. So get more details on that upcoming class at khcpl.org. Thank you so much for tuning into this class. And if you have any other questions, let me know. See ya.